David, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Mosheh. I'm looking forward to it.
You city biked over here.
I did.
That's a big thing for you.
I love it.
Yeah.
I bike to work every morning on the Lyft bikes in San Francisco as well. So we run the systems, across the country in a bunch of different cities, and they're growing like a weed, particularly e-bikes. They're game changers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it also now in cities makes you have to look both ways before you cross, because some of them are speeding very quickly.
It is true.
Down the street.
Yeah.
So you've just crossed the 2-year mark as CEO of Lyft.
Yeah.
You've said you want to help to lead one of the great comeback stories.
That's right.
What went wrong? I mean, for those of us who have only really interacted with Lyft, like by using the app, taking a ride, give us the backstory here of what Lyft was, what Lyft tried to be, you coming in here, and where you'd like to take it.
So Lyft was one of the early innovators in rideshare. In fact, you might say it was the early innovator. So the other guys get a lot of credit for sort of the black car thing, but it was really Lyft, John and Logan, the founders of the company, that came up with this idea of, anyone with a car can be a driver. And that was huge. Like, that was the thing that allowed the thing to scale beyond just, a kind of bespoke black car service. So that was them. The other guys kind of came up with it too, but even they will give Lyft credit for really pushing that forward. So that was back in...
I should mention for all of you listening on the podcast, the other guys we're referring to here is Uber.
That rings a bell.
Okay.
So anyway, and that was kind of the, call it the 2010s. Then 2020 comes. COVID, a disaster for rideshare. I mean, literally, you look at the graphs and it goes from, growing to just absolutely falling off a cliff. I mean, nobody wants to be.
Right. We stopped leaving our houses.
We stopped leaving our houses, and we certainly didn't want to be in a car with somebody else. So at that point, companies had a choice. And one of the things that John and Logan decided to do, and they had been working on this before, was they wanted to create other lines of business beyond just rideshare. But they didn't go the food delivery way. They did some stuff with car rentals. They did some, just a whole bunch of different things. And truthfully, doing a whole bunch of different things is really hard, because it's hard enough to do rideshare. Rideshare is a very operationally complex business. It's got very high demands, service level demands are super high, 24/7, availability, all these different drivers who are not even your employees.
Yeah, just like to pause on that.
Yeah.
For those of us who, again, we expect to open the app, put in an address,
right,
see multiple options priced, like immediately get a driver, if it's, especially like in a place like New York City, where like, I don't want to be waiting more than 6 or 7 minutes. I know some of you, depending on where you live, might need to wait a bit longer, but that is a complex back end.
100%. It is, and you know what? It's the intersection between the digital world, right? All of the pricing you have to do, all the ETA estimation you have to do, all of the which driver should get this ride at this exact moment, and how much should it be priced, and how much should the driver get, all of that math. And then there's the physics of the thing. The physical world gets in the way, right? Like atoms, like, where there's traffic jams, where are there not traffic jams? Where is there available, are there enough drivers, on the west side of the city versus the east side of the city? What time of day is it? Is it raining? So it's very, very operationally complex and computationally complex. In fact, the guy who runs our marketplace group, which is the supply demand joining, his name is Sid. He was a PhD in physics. And he said that the Lyft marketplace is more complicated than anything he had to do as a PhD in physics.
And add to that, the drivers are not full-time employees. They're contractors who are deciding whether they want to drive at this moment or not.
100%. And to be clear, like right in the middle of we'll vend out these ride requests, and drivers can say yes, they can say no. They can cancel after they say yes, which is quite annoying. A tiny little story there. When I joined, we had about a 15% cancellation rate. Now it's down to 4%, between 4 and 5%. So we've really focused on...
That's interesting. And you came in 2023, and I will say this, David, just as somebody who has lived in New York City for 15 years, has been a pretty active user of rideshare. That was definitely something I noticed several years ago that led me to use the other guys, quote unquote.
So what you're talking about is a very normal dynamic, which is people will start with one, and then they will either have a good experience or a bad experience. And if they have a bad experience, they will flip to the other guys. And so this is what we've done over the last couple of years. And it's been an enormous, enormous change. It's why we have more riders than we've ever had, more drivers than we've ever had, more active riders, more frequent riders, because we're just giving better and better and better service. And so to sort of zoom way back out to your question, where the other guys started to go in a bunch of different directions too. They've got an Eats product and a bunch of other things. When I came, I said, let's really focus on getting rideshare right. Let's really focus on it. Just obsess over customers and just improve the service so much that people would be almost irresponsible not to check Lyft and not to have Lyft on their phone.
So you, in the 2 years, the market was effectively Uber 74, Lyft 26. You're now at about 30% of the market.
Yep.
Is that cutting into them? Is that creating new riders? How have you approached it?
Well, that's definitely cutting into them. I mean, if you're talking about share. But
Yeah.
truthfully, that's not my main focus. My main focus is the 160 billion rides people take in their own cars every year, just in the US, that they're not taking in rideshare. And in a way, it's crazy, right? It's a better experience. Someone else is doing the driving. You can be texting, you can be dozing off or spacing out or on the phone or whatever it is. So what's held the industry back, I think, is not so much. I think it's a little bit almost the over focus on the competitive dynamic and not enough innovation. So what have we done? First day I started, literally 10 o'clock. It was April 17th, 2023. So I come in at 9, I get my computer and all the sort of stuff that you do, even as a new CEO, it's the same thing. And then 10 o'clock, we're like, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a meeting about women driving women. So half the population is women. We didn't have a product for women riders. Women riders sometimes feel uncomfortable.
That was a priority for you coming in here.
First day, literally first day. I mean, we had to adjust prices down. We had to adjust pay up. Frankly, we had to do something very difficult, which was to do a layoff in order to afford to do those two things. But more than anything else, we had to start innovating again and stop just focusing on what the other guys were doing and start focusing on customers. So we launched Women Plus Connect a couple of months later. Super, super popular. I just looked at this. Some 115 million rides, I think, given in the Women Plus Connect program since then. Much more recently, we've launched Lyft Silver for older people, right? I don't know if are your parents still alive?
My parents are, my father's in his mid-70s,
Okay.
and my mother and father are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Okay. Yeah. Are they still driving?
They are still driving, but I will say that they recently moved to Texas, and so they were in Chicago for 50 years, and they don't know the roads that well. And if you know Dallas, Texas, and Texas generally, a lot of you got to take the highway to basically get everywhere.
Yeah.
So they have become frequent users of ride sharing.
So I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear that it's gone that direction as opposed to the mom, dad, let's take away the keys, and there's no other option for you, which is a very, very normal conversation that people have, and it never goes well. It never goes well because it feels like you're making their lives smaller and less engaged. Lyft Silver, but a lot of people, particularly older folks, don't necessarily feel super comfortable with rideshare. They're worried that they're going to do something wrong. They're worried they're not going to be able to call someone for help. They're worried the car is going to be too small. They're going to have to stoop to get in it, which is uncomfortable. So we fixed all those problems. They're bigger cars, easier to get into, good drivers for sure. Also, one-click customer support. And I literally tested it the other day, and it was great. 30 seconds later, I was talking to an agent. So that product, which we launched a couple of months ago, has been a huge success. So that's part of the innovation too.
So Lyft Silver, there's specific car models that you require for that, just for easy access.
Yeah.
And then what of the drivers? What is unique about the drivers if a driver wants to do Lyft Silver?
Yeah. So I mean, we have a whole, as you know, a driver rating program and all sorts of sort of back end technology to understand what drivers are more likely to be good for older folks because they have typically higher service levels and so forth. And then we also ask drivers, do you actively want to be part of this program? And then the app, you can flick it into Lyft Silver. I love this product because, check it out. So you can see it now like this. It's just got two big old, there we go. It's just got two big old buttons. When do you want to ride? As soon as possible, leave today or in the future. And a big old get help button on here. And I can guarantee you, if I push that button, 30 seconds later, my phone will ring and I'll get connected right to an agent.
So you have live human agents ready to help people.
And it's so amazing. The thing that you hear, this call may be recorded for quality and training purposes.
Yeah.
So that's true.
Yeah.
I've listened to these calls and they are great. Gosh, older people kind of like to talk. And so they just will tell you all their life story and why this is so important. And can you please explain to me, does rideshare mean there's going to be someone else in the car with me or am I going to be just alone in the car? Mm-hmm. And if something goes wrong, am I going to be able to contact you? And our customer care group is really, really patient and walks them through it. And the nice thing is from a business perspective, once they're in, they're in. This is not something they're going to be flipping back and forth between us and the other guys on.
It's interesting you mentioned that you're actually listening to the customer service calls yourself.
Yeah.
I imagine not all of them, but a selection. But you also drive Lyft. Talk to me about that experience, how often you're doing it, how exactly it works when the CEO is actually driving a Lyft himself.
So I love my job in general. And when I drive, it is particularly awesome. So I do it about maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. I don't actually tell anyone ahead of time. My whole comms and group all goes bananas about this stuff.
So no one within Lyft knows when you're about to hit the road?
No, because I don't want to make this thing a big thing. And sometimes I don't even know. I'm like, I think I'll drive for a couple hours right now. So in fact, for example, last Christmas Eve I did it. And it was wonderful. So I literally get in my car, I can turn the app on, so on and so forth, and then just start picking people up. And I do it, I always say this, I drive to learn, not to earn, but it is a really important experience because it really gives you a sense as a driver of, it's a complex job. You're juggling incoming requests and sometimes riders are in super good mood. Sometimes they're not in a really good mood. I remember I picked up a woman who had unfortunately just dropped all of her presents. It was Christmas Eve. Just dropped off her presents because she had picked up the call from her mom, and then the mom's call dropped, and she was very worried about her mom. So she was very agitated when she got in the car. 20 minutes later, she couldn't have been calmer. She actually apologized to me for how agitated she was. But you realize you kind of have this relationship. It's almost like a bit of a bartender thing. Like people will tell you things and I picked up another woman who literally was coming out of a guy's house at 11 o'clock in the morning. We had a choice. We had a conversation about making good choices, this sort of thing. So anyway, so some of it's like that.
though I imagine that, and now like you have me feeling bad because there are definitely times where like I'm in the middle of work things and the last thing I want to do is have a conversation with the driver.
And I totally get that too. Yeah. So here's the thing. As a driver, you're in the service business. And so you got to spend a couple of minutes or seconds thinking, does this person want to talk or not? And sometimes it's super obvious. Talking on the phone, headphones on. Sometimes, I just say, how's your day going? And the person just opens up. And sometimes they'll be very frustrated by, a rideshare experience. Because of course I'll ask them, I'll say, why did you choose Lyft today? And they'll say, well, I chose it because it was a little bit lower price, which was really nice, but wow, I really don't like the surge pricing and stuff. And so we have a long conversation about that. Or they'll say, I chose it because I'm a Chase Sapphire Reserve customer and I really appreciate that I'm getting 5x points and $10 a month. So I start to get real insight into both why drivers choose to drive and how that goes, and also why riders choose this.
Have there been major or minor decisions you've made following doing one of your routes?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, a bunch. Yeah. I mean, probably the most famous one that I've talked about a couple of times is this woman, Ann, in Sausalito, California, told me that basically every morning she would get up early just to check prices. So Sausalito to downtown San Francisco, maybe it's $25, usually might be 30, 35, or 40 if it's raining out or if it's there's a lot of demand or crazy things are happening. And so she told me about this story, and she literally had donuts. She was like, today is a day I could not work from home because I have donuts for my colleague's birthday. So I wasn't going to be able to just sort of work remotely. And so that was really the motivation behind this price lock feature, which allows you to pay $2.99 and lock in a price. And the price will never go above, basically the average price. So she's got a guarantee. In fact, I just talked to her a couple of weeks ago again, and she says, it's so great. Like, I literally don't have to worry about this anymore.
Oh, so if you have a go-to route that you take off and you can lock in a price for that.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
As far as making the pitch to folks to switch over, I mean, I know this in a completely different context. So in a previous life, I was at CBS News for a decade and went over there to help launch one of the iterations of the morning show. Oh, yeah. And morning show television for years is like, I watched the Today Show. I watched Good Morning America. Yep. Like getting them to even try you. Even people, it was interesting, would do focus groups. People were like, oh, I hate what they're doing over on that show now. I was like, well, have you tried the other one? Like, no, my mother watched it, I watch it, and that's what I do.
Yes.
And getting people to switch over is such a challenge in all contexts.
Yes.
And so I'm curious as to the pitch you make to those out there who use the other guys as to what is the specific advantage to trying out Lyft?
Yeah. So generally better service. That's what we're aiming for. I'm not saying we're always achieving it, but that is absolutely what we're aiming for.
How do you do that with 1.5 million drivers who, by the way, some of whom drive around New York with a Lyft logo and an Uber logo and switch between you?
It's one of the challenges of the ages, isn't it? So remember, the service doesn't just mean what happens in the car. It's also how fast we pick you up. So here's an example, something we're just in the process of trying right now. It's called Instant Match. If you're lucky, you'll get one of these over the next couple of weeks. Which basically says, so today what happens is you open up the app, you get a bunch of prices, and then you click a button, and then we match you with the driver, and then the driver shows up some minutes later. Imagine a world where you open up the app, and it says, basically, we've already got a driver for you, and he's 2 minutes away. Click here, the driver's on his way as soon as you click. So it's now not a 2 or 3 or 4 minute arrival time. It's a 1 or 2 minute arrival time, and the person is driving towards you from the second you hit the button, not after 60 seconds.
How do you anticipate that? Is this the physicist you have working for you?
Absolutely, it's his job. It's his job. Yeah, this is predictive AI and really understanding driver supply and knowing a bit about the types of trips you tend to take and when you take them and all these different things. So that would be an example. I'll give you another one, Extra Comfort. Extra Comfort is a mode. It's a little more expensive. It might cost you $2 or $3 more, but it's a newer car. It's a better driver. He'll typically be quiet, or she will. Got a little bit more leg room. So that'll give you a little bit better service guarantee right now. So we can do some things, and then we can coach the drivers, right? In fact, as a driver, you see this. This is an Extra Comfort ride. Please, this person doesn't want to be talked to. And by the way, you can't have dangling smelly things in your car if you want to be an Extra Comfort driver. So step by step by step. But here's the other advantage we have over the Good Morning America and Today Show thing. People don't, and I don't want to speak poorly of my competitor, but maybe your listeners can agree or disagree. I don't find a lot of people that love those guys. I don't find a lot of that. I find instead people who use them by default, by habit, it's on their phone.
And it's become the verb, right? It's like sort of Google, Xerox, Kleenex.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So that's sort of a drag for me. We're going to work on that problem. But anyway, if I can just get them to check us out, they're going to have a good experience. And typically if they check you out, at least then you're in the mix. And remember, pardon me, you just said I got 30% share. I think it's closer to 31, but who's going to quibble? But
we'll give you 31.
There we go. Appreciate that,
right.
Mosh. Thank you. But think of it this way: if everyone had both apps and they chose us 50% of the time, we'd have 50% share. So I got some advantages that the other guys that Good Morning America didn't, which is people aren't switching back and forth between ABC and CBS and NBC all the time.
But there is a slight price advantage, right? That was a thing for you. Right now, is there a certain percentage or dollar amount that people can expect?
We aim for just a little bit less. Our basic pricing strategy is to be competitive and reliable. We've taken $50 million out of surge pricing, so the reliability really is important. But on the competitive side, we try to be a little bit less expensive, but frankly, both of us have pretty similar cost structures. That's pretty hard. So in certain cities at certain times, we'll go a little more aggressively. Frankly, so will they. But that's kind of a skirmish. I think big picture, we try to be competitive.
So you mentioned delivery earlier, that they went big on Eats.
Yep.
How are you approaching it? I know you have a partnership with DoorDash, and then you'd mentioned when we spoke before about a recent Sephora partnership that you did as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so our basic view is the best way to create great service is to really focus on rideshare. And so that means, by definition, we're not going to focus on food delivery. We're not going to focus on other things. And so, but we know that our riders want that. So guess what we do? We partner with DoorDash. Our DoorDash partnership is awesome. We actually had more one-day signups a couple of weeks ago than we've had since it started. It's a great, kind of you sort of think of it as a co-loyalty program. So, if you're a Dash Pass member, you get a bunch of discounts on Lyft. Sometimes you get free rides to the airport. Sometimes you get 5-10% off, different things like this. And then you get free Dash Pass if you're an active Lyft user. So it kind of goes both directions. And it's great. We launched it last October 30th, I think it was. Millions of people signed up in the first couple of months, and then it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Remember, Dash Pass has 18 million members around the world, so it's a very, very large program, and it's great that we can, frankly, share some of their customers onto the Lyft ecosystem. The Sephora conversation we were having before was a different type of thing. Businesses have sort of a problem, particularly physical world businesses, and it's actually my old employer, Amazon. So, I get to see the...
and you were early on at Amazon, right? What are you employee?
I was. I think I was employee 37 at Amazon. So
wow.
It was
very
tiny,
early. Yeah.
Very, very early. And my job was to grow the company. It was to become not just a bookstore, but a music store, a video store, a toy store, and tool store. So look, all these years later, obviously the company's been successful beyond, I think, anyone's imagination. Even Jeff, I think, is probably a bit surprised at how big it's come. But it's obviously a real problem for physical world retailers that have to compete with online. So Sephora is a physical world retailer, of course. You can buy their makeup online, but you also buy it in the store, and they want you to come in the store because it's a more interesting experience. And of course, they don't have a middleman there. So what do? They partnered with us. We gave discounted rides to Sephora around, I think it was the middle of July, for 2 or 3 day time period. It's actually around the same time Prime Day was, so there was a competitive thing there. And it was great. We branded some of the cars. We wrapped them in Sephora wrap with a Sephora Lyft co-brand. And it was great. It was literally produced foot traffic for the merchant. So that's an area of our business that is a growing area. It's our media and ads business because we have first-party data and we've got literally people on their way to stores and restaurants. And so if we can nudge them or give them a coupon to go to a certain place and it's good for them and good for the merchant, it's great for everyone.
So you weren't delivering Sephora product, you were delivering people to Sephora.
That's the difference.
And that's a big priority for you.
Yeah.
How does that square with where we're headed in the future? You've talked about robotaxis, self-driving cars, but the human element is so important to you.
It is.
So how does that inform how you're approaching this new reality?
So you're putting your finger on something that I think is so important, and maybe we need to spend more time thinking about it. So technology is... it's inevitable. It's gravitational. It's gravitational. It will just continue to be part of our lives. And unlike gravity, it will actually get stronger and stronger and stronger over time because you have literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of people trying to make their apps more engaging, trying to get you to spend more time on them. I mean, it's tidal, right? Like that, like a tidal wave. Okay, so what's good about that is it's awesome, right? Like we use tech in all of our lives in all sorts of interesting ways. But what is not so good about it is Every second you're spending on your phone, every second you're sort of giving your attention and your engagement to a physical device, that is by definition not time you're giving to a physical world experience or a person who is sitting right next to you. And unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that pound for pound, minute for minute, physical world experiences are the better ones. They just are. They're, the physical world meeting is more fun than the physical world, than the virtual world Zoom. It just is. So, and we get more energy from it as a species. We live longer, read all the prescription for America stuff. And it's always about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the loneliness epidemic. I mean, up to the Surgeon General, they're talking about
Up to the Surgeon General. And then, by the way, AI is going to make it even weirder, right? All of a sudden, we're going to have AI friends. I actually read this whole piece the other day about people literally getting engaged to their AI.
And I mean, I saw a story last week about increasingly seniors, who are lonely, having AI as their relationship. I mean, my fear, by the way, I have a 2-year-old daughter, is that she's going to come home in 20 years and being like, I'm like, who are you dating? And she'll be like, I'm dating AI. And she'll be like, and I'll have an issue. And she's like, oh, you're so not open-minded about it, right?
I would say that prediction will come true, but I don't think it's going to be 20 years from now. In fact, I think parents are having that conversation even today. There's something like 30% of kids today, young kids, teenagers, are, let's say, in a relationship with an AI, just in the sense that they're thinking of it as a sort of sentient being that they're talking. So, okay, look, I don't want to sound like a Luddite. Like, this is not necessarily only bad. There will be times where it's amazing. But broadly speaking, I suspect we are better if we are holding on also to the importance of the physical connection. And that's why Lyft matters so much, that's the business we're in.
So the topic here, robotaxis.
Yeah.
What is the state of play today on robotaxis? What is the goal? And how does that work with your 1.5 million current drivers? How do you see that mix playing out?
Yeah. So I love this question because I think it's so, it's so relevant and fresh, certainly if you're in like a city like San Francisco where they're everywhere. Okay. First thing I'll say is I think self-driving cars are going to be hugely positive for the rideshare industry and for Lyft in particular. Why? Because it is a new product that is a safe product. It's a reliable product. It's cool. It's novel. And it even has some advantages, as you sort of point out. Like, you don't necessarily always want to talk to the driver. Now, it has some disadvantages too. What are those? Well, first of all, there are not enough of them. And there are not going to be enough of them for a long time. When a concert lets out, even at a 5 o'clock, in the afternoon rush hour, there's just no way.
So just give us perspective here. How many, when you add up you plus the competitor plus everybody, how many rideshares are there a day, and how many vehicles we're talking about, and where are we today in terms of robotaxi?
Great call. So let's think of it this way. We do, I'll round down just to be generous. Let's call it 2.2 million to 2 million rides a day. Let's say the other guys maybe do, 3, something like that. So call it 5 million between the two of us, 5 million rides a day. Well, probably more like 6. Okay, there are maybe, in terms of total robotaxis out there right now, cars on the road that are self-driving, maybe they're 2,000, something like that. So 2,000, 5 million. Okay, so that gives you a sense. And its adoption is going to be limited by, and by the way, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. But what will limit the rate will be everything from regulations, which are spotty and state by state, human acceptance. Not everyone's going to be stoked about the concept. The availability of the technology, the number of OEMs. So these are car makers right now. You're pretty much in a Jaguar, which is the Waymo product, or that's kind of it, and they're not even making that model of Jaguar anymore. It's called the I-Pace. So there are all these things that have to line up. And even the most aggressive estimates, if you set Tesla aside, who's got its own kind of thing going on, but there maybe will be 20 or 30,000 in 5 years type of thing.
So in the year 2030, we'll only have 20 or 30,000, again, with 6 million plus rides a day.
That's exactly it. So I think the hybrid network is the dominant one. In other words, the one that drivers continue to drive their car, their self-driving cars, people can choose between the two of them. And then I think if you think out even further, so now you're asking the question, well, what happens in 10 years to people driving cars? Well, first of all, I still think there are going to be some human drivers. But I also think, second of all, a lot of what drivers do today is the following. They think of it as, I'm going to use 2 assets. They may not think of this as what they're doing, though. They're using their car, which is an expensive thing, and they're using their time. The day after tomorrow, you can imagine where you buy a car and you still deploy it on the Lyft network. You just don't have to be behind the wheel. But still, someone's got to clean it. Someone's got to maintain it. Someone's got to decide when it's operable and when it needs to be doing something else, like picking up your own kids and stuff like that. So I think that we're designing for this world. It's called Lyft Ready. And when we talk to drivers about it, they're like, that's awesome. Like, I'm so glad you're thinking about the world of individual AV ownership where we can still participate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually at a presentation, I want to say it's like 2017 or 2018, so before you got to Lyft.
Yep.
And they were describing this like city of the future, right? Where you own the car, but the car is driving you.
Yep.
It drops the kids off at school, drops you off at work. You put it into Lyft mode. It makes some money for you doing some rides. It picks up the groceries and then picks you up from work, picks your kids up. And then maybe you're like, okay, I'll send it out to go make a couple more rides. And makes like, is that a reality? And when is that? Is that 2040? Is that 2050? Like, how do you guys think about this?
Well, so no, I don't think that's 2040, 2050. We actually have a relationship with Mobileye right now. Mobileye is a provider of driver assist technology today in a lot of cars.
Yeah.
And they're building towards self-driving. And the whole design of that is around exactly what you're saying, so that their tech can be built into, I'm making this part up, but to VW and Audi and Stellantis cars and whatever, such that when you buy it, you can start to do this. Now, what's going to hold that back isn't going to be the technology per se. It's going to be all the infrastructure you have to put around it. Who cleans the car? Who makes sure the car is serviced, even if it breaks down in the middle of the day? Who makes sure that the car is up to certain standards before you just kind of let it go? And that's where, again, we come in. We have a whole fleet management group called FlexDrive, and that's literally all they do every single day is make sure cars are ready to go and on the road for the cars that we actually own ourselves.
So when you say not 2040 or 2050, you're talking about this is more the back half of the century. Like,
oh, no, the other way around. No,
you think it's sooner than?
I think if by 20, look, I think in the early 2030s, I think buying a car that is not self-driving, at least at some level of sophistication, will be kind of like driving a stick shift. It's not like you don't do it. I like driving a stick shift. It's super fun.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it's the dominant mode for most people. So I think, no, you're talking about 2030 to 2035. There's a car that you're going to hear about a little bit more soon from a company called Tensor. They're doing very interesting. It's a purpose-built AV, and it's very, very small production, but very, very young company. But they're building, and it's got like 20 sensors on it. It's crazy. So it is literally built to be self-driving right now, and you'll be able to buy it next year. So it's coming.
I'm so interested to what this does culturally, because already I've noticed, again, my daughter is like too young, but among those parents out there with teenagers, it was very much like a rite of passage, right? Like, getting that driver's license was like freedom.
Yeah.
Like, and I got my grandmother's like 87 Oldsmobile Cutlass. Like, right.
Nice.
Like, I know exactly.
That is a
but
nice
then
ride.
My dad put a spoiler on it to make it look slightly cooler. As cool as you can make an Oldsmobile Cutlass.
Oldsmobile
right, exactly.
Cutlass is not cool, but anyway, cool. Nice try.
I had that.
Yeah.
But like, that was it. I didn't
had a
care.
vision.
Like, I had vision.
Yeah,
I had one of those like Discman with the tape thing that connected so you could like play it on the radio.
Yeah.
But that was it. Right.
Yeah.
But today that's not the case.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because kids are growing up in an era where they can order a Lyft.
That's right. Yeah. I think you put your finger on right at the beginning. The freedom that you get, it turned out wasn't so much the fact that you were driving. It was the fact that you could go anywhere, and that was it at any time of day. Now, this is one of those areas where I think that nostalgia will continue to tug at us. I still think there will be a role for like the big open road trip. I'm driving myself, you know what I mean? But it's not going to be the thing that you just pine for from age 16 in one day. It's one of those things where, at some point I'll definitely get around to that. And then frankly, there may be a time where you say, you know what, maybe I'll just take a nap and I'll just let the car drive itself.
So we're entering a reality where like you're not going to need a driver's license.
Definitely not need. You might want one, but you won't need one.
You won't need one. You'll be able to survive.
Yeah.
Fascinating. As you think about AI as a component, how are you utilizing AI both internally, also for the customer experience, and how does that work with the Robotaxi developments as well?
Well, I mean, on the Robotaxi, it's all AI. It's all AI. Literally, I mean, that's the thing. And that's what's going to distinguish, I think, tomorrow's Robotaxi companies from yesterday's. Yesterday's still grew up in a world of machine learning and ML and kind of early gen stuff. I wouldn't at all be surprised to find that AI companies today will be self-driving car technology providers tomorrow based on totally new technology stack. But back to where we're using it right now, and I like the distinction. I think there are internal uses and external uses. I would say actually if you're looking for maybe even a more complete framework, I would say there are incremental uses and sort of step change uses, right? So you can have internal kind of incremental. For example, we have AI now ripping through all of our code looking for unused lines of code, right? So any code that hasn't been touched in a while, hasn't been touched by a customer or by a developer, it can go because that's just cruft that kind of builds up and creates bloat and maintenance problems and so forth. That would be an internal use. We also have AI building test scripts, and something like 25% of our code is now written by AI. It's usually not very interesting code, but it's the basic stuff, kind of the infrastructure and glue stuff. So that's nice. On the more customer-facing side, but I would say still more incremental, is customer care. We just handled over the last, 5 weeks, something like 5 million inquiries through AI of which 3 million were not touched by a human. And I want to be super clear here. This is not necessarily a cost-saving thing. It might be over time. It's a quality-improving thing. It's like what used to take 24-hour turnaround. Driver says, why is my application stuck in some process? Oh, because you didn't file this paperwork, or this paperwork had a missing thing. Now it comes back in 2 minutes. So it's a game changer. And then on the more sort of step-changey stuff, the stuff I'm most excited about, and again, I'll talk about drivers, is we have an earnings assistant product that'll now say, okay, Mosh, you want to, what are your goals for the week? You might say, I want to earn $1,000, and I can't drive on Tuesday afternoon, and Friday morning I have to be at my kid's school to drop them off at 9:00, but I can drive after that. Great, okay. Given that, and then it might ask you a question. What do you think about airports? I don't really like going to airports. It's too crowded. Okay, cool. Do you mind driving over, bridges? Yeah, sure. I don't mind that. Okay, great. Here's your plan. Here's some suggestions that you can, do over the week. And if you do these things, we can't guarantee you can earn $1,000, but it's your best bet. So I think that sort of stuff, which marries, all the big data and, conversationality of AI with a real human need, which is I want to earn more money with my time. Awesome.
Question, actually, as a rider, what requirements do you have for your drivers in terms of maintenance? I speak as a New Yorker who's taken many yellow cabs,
Yep.
and you're like listening to the engine, you're like, I don't know if we're going to make it to the destination. When it comes to Lyft drivers, what can I expect in terms of how this car has been maintained?
Yes. So you have to do a car. I can tell you very specifically because I had to do it myself. You literally go to like a Goodyear or a Firestone or whatever. They inspect your car. They look at everything from the tail lights, the brake lights, have all sorts of different things. So it has to also be a certain model year or greater. I forget where we are right now. I think maybe 2017 is the oldest on the platform. For extra comfort, I think it's 2018, 2019. So we've got various things like that. So there's a whole set of, and you have to do it every single year. And that's the sort of stuff that drivers get frustrated about if hitches kind of come up.
What are you most excited about right now as you look at least at this year, next year, and in the coming years?
So you mentioned at the beginning, look, I was a literature major back in the day. A comeback story, I think there's nothing better than a comeback story. And we are right in the middle of it, right? We now are stronger financially, stronger from a customer perspective than ever. And then there's going to be this whole next thing, which is AVs are going to come on the platform. We're a global company now. We just bought this company Free Now. So we're now active in Europe, which is particularly interesting.
So in a number of countries through Free Now, you're in what, Spain, Germany, France,
the UK, Ireland, Greece. It's 9 countries in Europe, plus the US, plus
But
Canada.
I need a separate app over there. I can't use the Lyft app?
Today, yes.
Okay.
Tomorrow, we'll get you.
Got it.
Yeah. So the idea of like going through this business transformation of losing money to making money, and so that's very satisfying. And I have to say, actually, quick parentheses here. I've done different things over my life. Microsoft, Amazon. I ran a nonprofit. All these different things, and it is so satisfying personally to be able to draw from all those experiences, the competitive dynamic of Microsoft in the 90s and the customer obsession that Jeff Bezos had and the purpose-driven leadership that you really have to develop as a nonprofit leader. Otherwise, nobody wants to work for you. They can all make more money elsewhere. Putting all those things together, and here I am, I'm 60 years old, right? So putting all those things together at this stage of my life and seeing the company respond and seeing customers respond, super, super satisfying. And then I look at the future and I see self-driving cars and I see global and I see some more stuff we're going to do around higher end products we're developing and so forth. And I just get very excited about bringing all that together and getting more people out of their houses. It kind of comes together in a beautiful way for me.
Talking about your biography here for a second.
Yeah.
You're at Microsoft in the early days, right?
Yeah.
Early-ish days.
Yeah.
Amazon definitely in the very early days.
Correct.
There's a lot of comparisons that we can make between sort of early internet, what was foreseen, fears, goals. And we certainly have seen it play out in social media as well.
Yep.
And now, we're sort of at the next stage here with AI, like worst case scenario, best case scenario. Take me back to the Microsoft, Amazon days in terms of what was the vision for 2025 back then? Curious if you remember like what the big concerns were, what the big goals were, what actually turned out to be true, what turned out to be false, and lessons that we can now heed from that'll give us a reality check.
That is a great and big question.
Yeah.
I can tell
and I know I didn't like brief you on this or let you bring your notes. You're like, well, I got to refer to my journal from 1998.
Yeah, exactly right. Pull out my my old my calendar from June 98.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you a couple of things, and this is very much off the top of my head. I can say that Microsoft in the 90s, the computer on every desktop and every home, and what was called at the time the information assistant, kind of this, like there was, remember, no cell phones, no PDAs, like that term didn't even exist, BlackBerry, what was that? But Bill would occasionally give these demos of a handheld device that you could talk to typically, probably frankly inspired by, the Star Trek, computer and
well, I remember I got my first Palm Pilot. Remember Palm Pilots? Yeah, back then.
There we go. But at that point, they were nothing more than kind of a Rolodex,
right? There was no internet capability.
No internet, exactly. Yeah. But this idea of IAYT, information at your fingertips, that was absolutely something that Microsoft was thinking about even back in the 90s. Now, what was not at all foreseen that was only seen as a positive. There's no possible. So the idea of social media, of course, didn't exist. And certainly not the idea that social media could actually be isolating and divisive. You know what I mean? So I think one of the interesting things about Silicon Valley broadly, of course, Microsoft is Seattle, is there's a little bit of a problem where you kind of almost start with just fetishizing almost the tech. And you think that that's the solution to every single problem. And you don't spend a lot of energy, and kind of why would you, thinking about all the possible downsides. But anyway, that was sort of Microsoft in the 90s. Like information at your fingertips has to be good. And I think it's largely played out that way. I think the information at your fingertips part is largely played out for the positive. Google's a cool product, whatever. But, there's some downsides too on the social side. Then Amazon, the big dig against Amazon in the early days is if it's successful, it's going to put Main Street out of business, right? That was the big dig. Kind of like the Walmart problem of like Walmart is destroying small business. People still talk a lot about that.
And certainly we've seen like businesses out there that like there has been damage to that world.
No question at all. Yeah. No question at all. There is no more Circuit City. There is no more Borders. Like these are companies that probably don't exist. There's no more Bed Bath & Beyond.
Or even like, walking down the street, like recently, like the local toy store.
Yeah.
Right. That like where you could talk to them. They knew your kids. Yep. You would follow up. Like, okay, my kid is 4 now. Like that. It is very hard for those shops to still survive.
So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Now I will also point out that like Barnes & Noble is actually doing better than ever. Interesting enough, right? So like there's been sort of some of the one side and some of the other. But I think what's very interesting about that is, and this is what we were talking about before, I do think there's going to be sort of a physical world fighting back thing. Physical world fighting back. I think that the small business, the sort of all that sort of stuff, there's no reason why they can't exist. They just can't compete on selection. Don't try to compete on selection. But you can absolutely compete on service and personalized. And look back at that Sephora thing. Like you can't get, I'm not a Sephora, in the demographic, but I can see my daughters and what they do. They love going in there and kind of getting makeup applied and so on and so forth. So I think there's a physical world thing that fights back. That's kind of a reaction to sort of the Amazonization of the world. That's not really a term. And then if I think today, as I say, I really think the issue that we are not quite looking at straight on is we're talking a lot about AI taking jobs away. But
right, there's this like fear that we're going to go off a cliff, especially sort of those like beginner white collar jobs in accounting and law.
Right.
And I mean, this is something particular when we had Pete Buttigieg in a couple of weeks ago. He's thinking about it as he thinks about running for president in 2028, which is that he thinks AI will be the issue of that election in terms of its impact on jobs.
I 100% agree. And I think that the job issue, which sounds like an economic issue, I think is deeper. And this is where I do get a little philosophical. If I think of what motivates me, what gives me a sense of purpose, part of it is doing great work and hopefully doing work that is better than what a computer could do. Otherwise I don't add a lot of value. And man, if you have millions of people without a sense of purpose of the type that a job can give them today, because you might be able to get money other ways, but that sense of purpose is very, very hard to recreate. Then I think we have another form of the political issue we have right now of people feeling just sort of left behind and frustrated. Like I don't even know how to survive on this planet anymore. But again, it's no longer just a money issue. It's kind of like, what am I even doing here?
It's a societal issue. It's like a life's purpose issue.
Exactly.
I mean, I saw it play out in a smaller form. I mean, there's sort of unique circumstances, but as we watched the Arab Spring unfold in 2011, Egypt in particular for years would put off dealing with unemployment by making education free, making university free, giving people free master's degrees.
Yep.
But then they ended up having this highly educated population, none of whom could find jobs or purpose, as one of the kind of predicates to like leading to that revolution in 2011. And so that's, the big concern here that we could see across the Western world.
You've just put your finger on it. And I think, again, people talking, I know we're sort of wandering through topics here, but you think about work as something that you do to make money. But remember, it also is, maybe it's certainly where I met my wife now of almost 30 years. We started on the same day at Microsoft. And certainly it's where a lot of people find their purpose because, we are creators, right? We like to create things, not just learn, not just consume, but create. And creating often happens with other people side by side at the whiteboard or on the assembly line, whatever it is. And if you have fewer and fewer opportunities to do that, then there is kind of a little bit, I think, a question of the meaning of life question starts to poke its head out again.
So, you've been out there on the West Coast. You've been involved in some of the tech companies of our time, now trillion-dollar companies. Curious what lessons have been learned. If there's lessons that have been learned, especially coming off of 20 years ago, the philosophy, I think it was like they give Zuckerberg credit for like, we're going to move fast and break things. I don't know who actually coined the term. But the idea is now that we've learned our lessons societally of broken things, have folks out there like paused before doing thing? I feel like as I'm watching this AI race play out, and I'm asking you more as an observer, and you can tell me if there's a specific way you're approaching this at Lyft, but like, can we feel better about what is happening out there and how quickly technology is moving, or is the incentive structure still to be the first mover and not to think about the societal ramifications until things are broken or people are broken later?
I would love to be the person to tell you, yeah,
make me feel better.
We've
David.
solved that problem. That problem is all solved. You just said a very important word. The incentive continues to be, how fast can you move and how can you get that first? So many technology businesses are kind of winner take all businesses. I'm not in one. Interesting enough, there's no world where one person owns the whole rideshare space. Ain't gonna happen.
You don't even think about it as your goal. Your goal is to have 100% of rideshare.
It would be a terrible goal to have. Riders don't want it. Drivers don't want it. Regulators don't want it. Nobody wants that. That's just really a bad goal to go after.
Competition is good.
Wants. Competition is absolutely good because remember, 160 billion rides. 3 billion rides. So I would much rather have a competitor that I compete with, and together we grow this market, and together we, fight with each other over riders and drivers. That's the way to grow the pie to 160 billion. It's that you ain't going to get there if you're a monopoly. Not going to happen. So anyway, and I think it's good to get people out, right? So it all kind of follows. Back to your point, I think I do think there are companies. I think here's the problem. I think if you think of all problems, if you are the guy with the technology hammer and everything looks like a nail, I think you cause some problems in the world. I think if you remember that all problems and all businesses are essentially human problems and human businesses, I think you are more likely to end up in a better space. And that is very much my philosophy. And I don't want to sound like a sort of whatever, do good or whatever. It's not like that. It's just like, that's a way to build a stable business. Here's something I learned from Jeff Bezos. It's a good lesson. He said, look, people ask me all the time about what's going to change. And he said, I instead spend more of my time thinking what is not going to change. People are still going to want less expensive prices at Amazon. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I wish I could pay more for that product. People are going to want fast delivery. When I left, fast delivery meant 2 to 3 days. And one of the last conversations I had with the management team at Amazon was every minute you can shave off delivery is just good for the business, right? And now it's down to, it'll deliver overnight beyond your door.
Now they're going to like pizza style delivery, 100%. Timing. And Walmart's trying to do the same thing within the hour.
100%. So all of these things so people are impatient, people like low prices. In my world, I say people like getting together. They actually like having friends. They like physical world experiences. These are things that you can sort of bet on. So I bet on that. And I think that that's a good bet. And I think the technology is going to support that. But I think if I have some sort of lobotomy and someone turns me from, human first to technology first, then I will make all the same mistakes everybody else does of saying like, it's all about the tech. And I think that leads to a tricky place.
So then how would you recommend, I almost have you take off your CEO hat for a second, advise the government, how should they be approaching regulation, given that, we've acknowledged here that the incentive structure is still not there?
This is why I'm in private industry, not government, because I think that's a genuinely hard problem. I really do, because you also can't be naive. You can't think the United States lives in a vacuum. You look at other countries like China, and you know that their incentive system is. We work with Chinese companies. Baidu is an interesting example where we're partners on EVs in Europe, And man, are they wired for speed and delivery? They're
So
wired
China
for speed
works.
delivery.
Yeah.
China works. Yeah. So it is a very, very, very hard problem. I wish I had a good answer for you on that one. I got to pass.
So it sounds like you're not running for office after this, huh?
No chance.
What inspired you, having had the success at Microsoft and Amazon and go to the nonprofit world, what specifically inspired you to come back to this space to be CEO again? Was there something specifically about Lyft? Had you rejected other offers? What led you to come back?
It was such an interesting thing. So I was not looking for this at all. I had joined the Lyft board in 2021, I think it was, as my first public company board. I was super excited. I loved the founders. I thought they were great, John and Logan. Sean Agarwal, who's our board chair, was someone I had worked with for many years at Amazon back in the day. So he had known me. And really, they recruited me to the board because they wanted, here's an interesting thing about boards. Boards spend a lot of energy thinking about the financial strength of a company, the corporate strategy. They don't spend much time thinking about customers. They really don't. It's just not their vibe. They're way too far away. And John and Logan, to their huge credit, said, you know what, we want someone who's really good at thinking about customers and their needs, and also a good operator, someone who's built from small. I joined Amazon. It was a $16 million company. I helped.
Wait, there was a time where Amazon was only a $16 million company.
$15.6 million. $15.6 million in 1996, selling only books. And I remember Jeff in the interview said, I think if we do things right, maybe by 2000, we'll get to $1 billion, which was a hugely ambitious idea from 16 million to $1 billion. But we got there, I think, in 99. And by the time I left in 2002, we were at $4 billion. So anyway, from 16 million to $4 billion, I knew some things about operating at scale. So anyway, that was the job on the board. But what I found a little bit sort of frustrating, frankly, is you have very limited power on boards, really. You can kind of advise, but whatever. But anyway, it was fine. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot. Anyway, John and Logan decided to step down. The board formed a committee. They looked at a whole bunch of different people. And then my phone rang one day. It was actually Valentine's Day. I remember this, such a thing. And it was the three of them on the line saying, this is John, Sean, and Logan, saying, we've got an offer that we think you won't be able to refuse. And I said, what? They said, we want you to consider being the next CEO of Lyft. And I said, absolutely not. There's no way in hell. This makes zero, hang up the phone. You're wasting your time. But as the day continued, and actually as I talked to my wife over Valentine's Day and I thought more about it, I found myself getting super excited about sort of what I said before, taking the customer obsession from Amazon, the competitive spirit of Microsoft, the purpose-driven, leadership that I had to develop at Worldreader, putting it all together in a space that I already kind of knew as a board member, and frankly, where I was maybe a little frustrated as a board member not to actually be able to roll up the sleeves and get it done. So it just all kind of came together.
So I have friends who work at Amazon. I often hear this word customer obsession.
Yep.
What does it mean? I mean, because as we have a lot of people listening to this podcast who work at various companies, some run companies, some are entrepreneurs. What does it mean specifically to be customer obsessed?
It means that every single conversation you have about a feature or, the way the company goes starts with, tell me what this means for customers. Let me give you an example. Driver pay is always an issue within rideshare because drivers want to be paid more and riders want to pay less. So it's a two-sided marketplace and there's an inherent tension. Okay. So when I got to the company, I asked a simple question. How much do drivers make? And they could tell me all sorts of things about driver utilization and this and that and the other thing. But nobody can answer the very, very simple question. How much do drivers actually take home? And by the way, by make, I don't just mean how much do we pay them. I mean, how much does it cost them to maintain their car? How much does it cost them to get oil or gas? How much does it cost them to get the car clean from time to time? Just walk me through the basics of how much a driver's actually taking home if they drive for Lyft for some period of time. And honest to God, nobody can. It took 4 months. We actually wrote a whole paper on it. It's a whole white paper. Basically, the answer, by the way, is $20 an hour when they're on the app. On average, about $30 gross, $20 net after all those expenses.
$30 gross.
Yeah. 20. But when they're active, right? To be clear, I can't generate demand at 2 a.m. But if they're actively working, highly utilized, they're making on average 20. It's actually as high as 30, even maybe a little higher here.
That's across all markets.
In New York, that's across all markets. Higher in New York, lower in Cincinnati. So, but anyway, that's the difference between. Now, to be clear, this is a company that had been around for years and years and years. Many, many drivers had many, many conversations with Lyft about all sorts of different things. But Lyft didn't have in its basic toolbox a really clear, because you had to do the research, you had to look at the data, you had to understand what other things they're doing with all these different things. That's an example.
Got it. And then on the customer side,
yep.
What has been and what continues to be the most frustrating thing for the average rideshare customer that you're trying to solve for?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you 2 examples, but the first one I'll start with surge pricing again, because that's actually another really good example of what customer obsession is and isn't. Okay, let's talk about surge pricing for a second. Why does the $20 ride all of a sudden become $30?
By the way, in Manhattan, sometimes it's $100 when it's raining.
So there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So when it's raining. So why? It's not the rain. It's the fact that all of a sudden nobody wants to walk. So everybody wants to take a ride share, right? So all of a sudden you've got much, much more demand than you have supply because, so what can you do about that? You can do so much about it. First of all, you can look at weather forecasts, and then you can put incentives out of the marketplace to sort of get drivers there. But having done all that still, you're probably going to have to pay drivers more. Let's put it this way. The better you plan, the less likely it is that those prices are going to really surge. But planning is hard. It is very dynamic. All of a sudden, it's raining and, whatever, the Mets just finished their game or whatever it is. So if you really spend a lot of energy on it. Oh, and sorry, one last thing. It's kind of addictive. Just like bank credit fees, ATM fees. Like ATM fees, super annoying, right? Why do they exist? Because banks are addicted to them. It's like $2 a pop, $3 a pop. And usually they're not even your customers. So the people paying them, you don't have a big incentive to take away. Super not customer obsessed. But the point is that, so from a financial statement, it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden prices are up. That's great. All of a sudden our top line is doing well. So like, I guess it's kind of okay. It balances supply and demand and it drives the top line. No, it's terrible. Riders hate it. So we've gotten rid of $50 million over the last year. We've introduced price lock. We're going to continue to try to get it as low as possible so that we can get our riders a more consistent experience.
Curious, in a completely separate example, I was talking to the chief dishwashing scientist at Procter & Gamble.
I love that title.
Which is amazing. We also have talked to the chief laundry scientist over there.
Nice.
And
are they rivals or are they friends?
No, they're friends. They're friends. And in fact, like they'll learn stuff from the dishwashing world. They'll bring it over to fabric care. It's, it's interesting. P&G is this massive company, right?
Yeah.
And I asked the question, which is like, what is the threshold by which it makes more sense in terms of water use to run the dishwasher versus wash things by hand?
Yep.
And they said, believe it or not, 7 items. Only 7 items in your dishwasher, and it makes more sense with the modern dishwasher.
Yeah.
So in the context of driving versus rideshare, curious whether there is you guys have a certain financial threshold, distance threshold that you think about, whereas the average consumer, I'm like, should I drive? Should I take rise? Is there a way you think about that? Maybe that's the next white paper that you're working on. Yeah.
That was the next thing for us to think about.
Yeah.
I think, you know what? Because we have a two-sided marketplace, meaning a driver has to get paid enough to feel it's worth their while, and the rider's price has to be low enough such that it's worth their while. In a weird way, it's sort of a self-balancing thing. So there's no, like, which is I think from a consumer perspective, I always want people to take rideshare. I'm like, let someone else do the work, but it's got to be cost effective for you, and the driver has to be paid enough. So in a funny way, I don't think it's more of a math answer,
like
than a human answer.
Like if gas prices are over this amount at this distance with this so it's more.
But you're always sort of almost in the back of your mind, kind of doing the math. And remember, also, it's like, how much is my time worth, right? Like, because it's easier to do work in the back of the car than it is if you're driving. So I don't know. I don't think there's a simple answer to that one. All I know is that whatever that threshold is, I want it to be lower and lower and lower and lower.
How many states do you have covered right now? Like how many, or maybe it's down to the county level.
Yeah.
But where, because it sort of began as an urban thing. Now it's got the suburbs, and the rural areas.
Yep.
How much of the U.S. is covered right now?
Yeah. So we are in 280 markets, which is basically, it's certainly all 50 states, and it's in most major cities. It's in every major city, of course, and even second and third tier. Actually, where a lot of our growth is coming from right now is in sort of second and third tier, cities. Maybe not Seattle, but Tacoma. Maybe not even Tacoma, but Tukwila. Actually, you know what? I just heard last night that we're doing a little bit of kind of data mining to understand something, which this is not a great term, but I'll use it anyway. I think it was called rideshare creep, but actually I think the way she was talking about it was train creep. And what she was really saying is you could look at train lines like around Manhattan, New York City, like New Jersey Transit and PATH and so on and so forth, and you can sort of see how rideshare starts to develop further and further out as people commute more and more, and then they need to be able to get to the train station. So as train stations, I think it's as trains increase their route frequency, you can see rideshare developing around it. So anyway, long way of saying we're everywhere in the United States. We're now everywhere in Canada as well, significant. We just opened up Quebec a couple of weeks ago. We're now in Puerto Rico, and then as I say, we're in 9 countries in Europe as well. So the goal is to be everywhere you want us. That's the goal.
And I want to go back to the thing you mentioned that on your first day you talked about a women-only ride, like having a women driver.
Yeah.
And it struck, my wife and I were in Japan just in June, And on public transit, they actually have like women and child only cars.
Yeah.
For safety purposes.
Yep.
How popular has the women only function become,
Yep.
and how else are you thinking about safety?
Yeah. So on the first, super popular. And it's, by the way, it is a tricky issue. There are laws around gender, all sorts of different things. So it's a little bit complex, but it's a very, very popular feature. And you know when it tends to be used the most? It's not necessarily that women will say, I always want to use it. What they will typically say, and sort of the evidence backs this up, is I'm in a new city, or it's late at night, or I've just had a really long day and I just don't want even if it's the most innocent question in the world, what are you up to this weekend? I just don't want to even think that might be something that makes me feel like I have to engage in the conversation that I don't want to engage in. Whereas other women drivers don't tend to ask, or if it's asked in a different way that makes it feel kind of a little bit easier. So it's subtle, it's human psychology more than it is physical worries about safety. That's the thing that drives it. Now, safety, oh my God, we're putting so much emphasis on it. So a couple of new things. We actually just launched a whole new safety hub, but let me give you some examples of what you can do now. You can have PIN verification. So you want to make sure that the driver and you are absolutely matched. You hold up your phone, you see the PIN, they see the PIN, they have to match it, number one. Number two, we do a thing we have ADT Connect. So literally you can one click, ADT will be on the line. It'll talk you if you ever start to get worried. We do automatic outreach. So if the route is taking longer than we think it should take, we'll send you a text saying, is everything okay? We do, what else have we launched fairly recently? Those are some of the biggies. There's one other thing that I was just forgotten. But anyway, it's an area where I think rideshare, my goal for Lyft is that we are the safest way to get around. Already, we are incredibly safe from a sort of, per passenger miles, but still, there's too much stuff on the platform where people feel a little bit uncomfortable. They get themselves in a situation they didn't like. And so our job is to just try to take it off the table.
David, it's been great chatting with you.
It's been super fun. Thanks so much for the questions. Super wide-ranging. Love the
we talked about society, regulation, the future.
Yeah,
my daughter coming home with an AI boyfriend,
Your
girlfriend.
AI boyfriend 20 years
whatever
from now.
the pronouns will be for AI.
I don't even know. But one thing I do know is it's not going to be 20 years from now. It might be, she might have a best friend that's AI in 4 years. I don't know.
We'll see. She's got a lot of human relationships now with other kids, so that's
awesome.
good.
That's awesome.
Actually, one final question, just because we have a lot of people in leadership.
Okay.
And I do like to ask this question on a professional level, given where you've worked. Mm-hmm. What are the most important lessons you've learned as a leader internally in terms of managing employees, managing the future, managing vision? Mm-hmm. Do you have like the 10 commandments of David as CEO?
I do, actually. Not maybe 10, but I can tell you a couple of them. Yeah. Maybe I'll say 2. The first is you're only as good as your team. You're only as good as your team. And I think it's really important to internalize what that means. That's not the same thing as saying you're only as good as the people who work for you, which is a subset of that. But a team is a different thing. And every single week, I start so we have a management meeting every Monday morning for a couple of hours. And the first thing I always talk about, and we actually write a little document going into it, is us as a team. How are we growing as a team? How are we holding each other accountable? How do we have each other's backs? How are we figuring out a way to get rid of all the baloney, politics, and all this sort of stuff, and just focus on the task at hand? And we just actually did an offsite last week. We do them twice a year. And at the end of the offsite, people said, you know what? I have never been part of a team where I feel so like we are working together as one team, not 10 different people trying to manage their own stuff and all this sort of stuff. And they were really quite sincere about it. This is a person who had worked, actually 2 different people said it. One of them had worked at Amazon. The other had worked at Google for many years. And they both said it was remarkable. So that's one thing. Unlocking that team energy has been a big unlock. The second thing I'll say is I am an enormous believer in leading with purpose. And I know that sounds a little bit kind of mushy, but I want people jumping out of bed in the morning. I want them to say, I cannot wait to get to work. And that's not going to be just about, stock grants. It's not going to be just about salary. It's not even just going to be about working on something interesting. It's about feeling like you really are doing something bigger than yourself. And I just can't. In my first 100 days, I talked as much about purpose as I did about fixing our operational problems here, or customer stuff, or pricing stuff over there, and it seems to have worked.
All right, we'll end there. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Mosheh. Super fun.